Hello, this is Barry Kerr coming to you from Sedona, Arizona. Well, it's warm and beautiful. I'm going to talk to you in this presentation about what's coming up astrologically for humanity. Uh, it's an anxious time for all of us, I think. I'm looking at the surface events that are happening and how critical things are becoming. And we can sink into fear and despair on that, or we can reach for a larger part of ourselves that's able to grasp a more profound and expanded reality around what we're experiencing in our humanness. That's what astrology does at its best, and I'm happy to share my insights with you to help you aspire to a more noble view of what's coming in the next few years. So with that, let's get started. We're going to be looking at this year, 2018, starting with the election, and then taking a peek out mostly through 2020 and then a little bit beyond 2025. The basic theme of what I see and what most astrologers other astrologers I read, are seeing for this immediate time in front of us, these few years, is sort of a coming home karmically around the materialism that we have created as a species. And a lot of lessons coming home to us around that. When we attach so profoundly to material wealth and material pleasure and make that the end all of our value system, of what's important, that drives us individually, but also collectively in terms of cultural values and the economy and politics and so forth. When we make that material level of our experience the end all and be all, as we have over these last most of the 20th century, there's something to learn about that, of the imbalances, and that's what karma is imbalances that come back to haunt us. But what I see happening as we're coming to a head in that karmic trajectory, as we're experiencing what is certainly going to be difficult and challenging on the material level for all of us, within that also there are signs of how that ultimately will serve us collectively to reawaken in our humanness an awareness and attention to beyond the material, starting with a mental understanding of through ideas, through communication, and through thinking, of applying ourselves back to a more holistic paradigm for reality, necessitated by the harsh experiences and lessons that are before us. So before I go there, I just want to review a couple basic astrology principles so you can follow along with what I'm saying. The inner planets, the Sun, Mercury, Mars, Moon, Venus, Mars, I think I covered them all. Those are very personal, sort of individual planets that reflect the more personal ego side of our experiences. And so we're not going to talk a lot about those today. But I do want to start with Jupiter and Saturn, because Jupiter and Saturn are what we call the social planets. They reflect the parts of our human experience that really start to connect socially, collectively, to the collective energy of who we are as a collective spirit. And that's reflected in our culture and society and government and all the ways that we create this collective experience on the planet as humans. So Jupiter's role in that, what it reflects is our basic inherent desire from a soul level to have our experiences in life in the human plane, to grow back to the fullness of what we are as spirit by having all the experiences that drive us, that teach us what we're here to learn about becoming more conscious creators on this planet, in this time-space dimension. It's Jupiter that's sort of the engine and the driver of our need to explore and have adventure and do more things, have more things, have more experience, more and more and more, because it's how we grow back through experience to the fullness of what we are. It's how we bring to consciousness in this illusion of time and space and material plane, what we're here seeking in terms of fulfillment of bringing spirit into form. Jupiter's the driver, but it has some shadowy behavior. So it can turn into risk gambling, opportunism, winning, overdoing, over idealism, dogma. In terms of thinking we have the truth and that we're already there in our wholeness and we got the answer, that sort of thing. Saturn, which comes right after Jupiter, is sort of the container within all that happens. Saturn's the part of us that is respecting, made the commitment to come into the time-space dimension, into bodies, in order to learn the rules of time and space and form. And Saturn basically reflects back to us all of those rules, and those relate to qualities like structure and laws and rules and discipline and authority and responsibility and accountability, all of those things that we think of as the adult world when we're children, in our more Jupiterian sort of delight of exploring. And then Saturn is there saying, okay, but you got to, there's limits and there's rules and this and that. And it's not just, those aren't all just human created rules. A lot of those rules are the rules of the physical world, that you can't be in two places at the same time, apparently, at least within the illusion of the time-space dimension. And so we have to pay attention to all of those rules of the physical plane. And that's where we're running into trouble, is the Jupiterian part of us that wants to grow and expand and have it all is running up against the Saturnian illusions of limits of this world, that say, no, you can't quite do that. You can't have it all, really. You've got to choose, and you've got to be responsible, and you've got to take accountability. That is what's in play with Jupiter and Saturn, and it's the two parts of of our experience as humans on the collective plane that we actually have some conscious control over. We can control our Jupiterian tendency to excess. We can control our respect for the rules of this physical world and of the planet. We have that within our means to consciously bring our own volition to those principles. And so as Saturn and Jupiter are traveling through the sky, what we see is a dance that happens in which themes are laid out about lessons that we're learning around our need for expansion and growth and rules that we're learning. And about every 20 or so years, Jupiter and Saturn come back to the same point in the sky. Jupiter catches up with Saturn and they're conjoined, what we call that. And it sets a theme for about 20 years of what's in store for us. And so astrologers are able now, with the help of computers and so forth, to be able to go back in time and look at what those themes are and how it correlates to the way human experience is playing out on the collective level. One of the patterns that we've discovered is that Jupiter and Saturn conjoin for each time they conjoin every 20 years or so, they do so in the same element for about 160 to 200 years. In other words, for example, they might conjoin in the sign of Capricorn. Or they might conjoin in the sign of Taurus or Virgo. Okay, those happen to all be earth signs, ruled by the element of earth. And indeed, for the last 160 years or so, Saturn and Jupiter have been conjoining each time in an earth element sign, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. The profoundness of that is that it emphasizes, for all of these almost couple hundred years, it has emphasized the element earth in our collective experience as the theme of what we're here to learn about. And earth as an element, is like it sounds, it basically is the connection to the physical realm, the material realm, things, tangible, okay? So if you think back for the last 160 years or so, when this pattern, recent pattern started of Jupiter and Saturn conjoining in earth signs, it was just at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And as we all know, if you study history, this has been, the last couple of hundred years, especially into the 20th through the 20th century, it's been an intense time of humanity really investing highly in the material plane as the end all and be all, so that our values, and this isn't every individual, but collectively, you know, in terms of how it's affected our shared cultures, it became all about owning things, getting more money so you can have more things and more delightful things and more comforts and more pleasure. So all of those extensions of the physical world that aren't inherently bad, but you can see the excess that we've gone to, the Jupiterian part of us that wants to have it all. We've just poured all of our intensity into that material plane. And there's been some delightful and wonderful things we've experienced in that, but there's also been a lot of excess, a lot of overdoing, and not paying attention to the Saturnian part of the equation of what's the limits? What's this do to the planet? What's this do to each other? What's this do to our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health? How's it affecting everything? You know, that's what Saturn sort of imposes on us. And so in another way, what's culminated from this earth element cycle is we've even dismissed anything beyond the material as even being real. We've sort of grounded ourselves in orthodox scientific thinking, which basically says the end all and be all is the material, the atom. That's all there is, and anything that appears to be beyond material plane is just an illusion of the material. It's just chemicals in our brain that create that, and that it's not real. Okay, it's all material. So that's become sort of the religion of humanity is material science, which backs up the whole material values that we've created. So more than any time ever in the history of humanity and the evolution of the human spirit, we have sunk deeply, deeply, deeply into the material as the reality of all that is. Now, those of us who have awakened or never quite bought into all that are aware that there's more to reality than that. And so we know that there are dimensions of our being that we can tap into that really bring awareness and inform our values, inform our decisions, inform our actions that take us to experiences in this material world that are not just material. You know, there's our whole mental world, there's our emotional world, there's our spiritual inspiration. Those are all parts of our human experience that have been devalued and are being sickened basically by the overemphasis of the material. Now here's the exciting thing that's coming up. This long-term Jupiter-Saturn pattern that's been happening in the Earth element is about to change. At the end of 2020, Saturn and Jupiter will conjoin in the sign of Aquarius, which is an air sign. So there's going to be what we call a mutation from Earth to air. And that will open up to be followed by other things that go along in a similar way with that theme. But that's sort of the opening salvo of the shift. But it's not like this sudden sort of like, oh, everything changes now, and now we're okay. It's more just sort of the dawning. That song from the 60s comes back, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It's sort of like that. It's just, yes, it just starts to open things up. But we still have to deal with the karma that we've created collectively around our excess of materialism and disrespect for the material plane. Okay. Which shows up in terms of a choice. And some of you who attended my last who attended previous presentations will remember some of this. We have a choice between what we consider sacred. Do we make money and the material things of life what is sacred? Is that where we expend our Jupiterian aspirations of abundance and expansion on the material, just the material? And then we create the market that allows that to happen as the sacred bottom line of our society? Or do we make sacred life itself, the experience of having a human experience? Is that what's sacred? And then we hold sacred the container for that, which is basically the planet Earth, the entirety of the material plane we live on, and honor those rules that are there that allow us to experience the fullness of these sacred lives that we have. That's the choice in front of us, and it's coming home to roost. So we can continue to create the social order that ignores all of the collective needs of humanity for generations to come, and ignores the limits to that kind of growth that increase the bottom line economic GNP. Or we can choose a conscious way to engineer a social order through our Jupiterian, Saturnian principles inside of us. We can create the order that fits the collective needs for everyone, for coming generations, and redefines the bottom line economically to include the effects on people and the environment. That's really what's in play here. That's what's behind a lot of the struggle that we're experiencing politically and culturally. So we have help in this. And the very outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, basically represent that help. They represent our connection to our greater beings, our souls, our divine consciousness. And they each have a different sort of angle on that intuitive connection to our greater being. But those planets are part of the mixture of what's always been happening throughout human history, but only in recent centuries have we been aware of them out there doing that. Because we've discovered them now because collectively, as a species, as humans in the collective consciousness, we are ready to start to incorporate consciously those dimensions of our being into our physical human experiences. So when we look at what's happening between Saturn and Jupiter in each round of cycle, we also are able now to look at how these outer planets connect to that particular cycle, and what kind of influence we can expect to receive from our divine consciousness to guide us, prod us, and goad us toward our highest potential of fullness, to really keep us sort of on track in terms of being able to learn how to create in this dimension the fullness of what we really are as love beings, of light beings, of truth beings, all the virtues that we aspire to. Now, the cycle that we look at astrologically on paper looks like a two-dimensional experience. It just things keep repeating. But in actuality, it's a spiral. There's an evolving upward, so to speak, higher vibrational dimension to the whole cyclical pattern that astrology looks at, and it's now understood in space, though the planets are circling around the sun in a repeating patterns, but also the sun is traveling through the galaxy. And so the planets are never in the same place, ever, because even though their relationship to each other and the sun gets repeated, they're also spiraling around through the galaxy. And our relationship to the rest of all of the properties of the galaxy are new. We're traveling through time and space. Nothing is ever repeated. And there's a spiraling evolvement to that. And that's part of what Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune inform us of.